Hey there! So in this class we're going to create the general template because the file needs to contain different layers, and these layers are usually always the same. So we're going to set up that first. So we need to create a new document, and usually I use a 1000 by 1000, and then everything else can stay the same. Of course, if you prefer to create with CMYK or RGB, that's your preference, depending on what you want to do with the pattern afterwards. And then you hit create. Okay, so we have our artboard here and the layers. So in here we can write guide. This would be our guide layer. And to make the guide, we need to make a little square. So we go to the rectangle tool and we do a 100 by 100 pixel square. And then we need to position this in a specific place. So this would be, if we go to transform and we write here 150 and 150. So we have a specific position we can use when creating our template. And the 100 pixel measure is so that we can divide the artboard, which was 1000 pixel, into 100 pixel sections. So this, I'm sure, will make more sense once we do everything else, once we create all the transformations and everything. But it's basically to have an easier way to proceed. So we have our square here. We need to turn it into a guide. So we go to View and Guides and Make Guides. And now it's turned into this, I don't know, kind of light teal color, light blue. And depending on your settings, so if you go into the guides here, you might have the guides locked or unlocked. So normally it doesn't matter what it says here, I will go into the layer and lock it, so you can't move it by mistake. Okay, so we need to create another layer. So, oops, that one, create new layer. And since the first template we're going to create, it will be just a simple grid template, I'm going to call this grid, but then we can change this with different names depending on what we do. This layer needs to have a couple of sub-layers. So if we select the layer and then we go here where it says create new sub-layer, and then we can rename this, for example, background, and then we go back to this layer and we make another sub-layer and we rename this bounding box. Okay, and this will be where we put our bounding box. So basically everything that will be drawn in this little square here, which is our guide, will have as reference the bounding box. So the bounding box is a square. So we go back to our square here, and it will be the same measure as the artboard, 1000 by 1000. It will have no fill and no stroke. So let's do it like that, and then it will be centered in the artboard, and we can lock it. So we have the rectangle here, or if you want you can lock just the rectangle, it's the same. And then in the background, so there are different ways of doing a pattern after you've done your drawing. If we add a rectangle here, we can use this rectangle, or square in this case, to make the background. But there are other ways as well, which I will show you. But anyway, let's make another square in here and center it as well. And we can lock it and we can close that. Okay, so we have prepared our different layers, and we are almost ready to go. As I say, there are different ways of making a pattern once you've done your design. So one of these ways is to actually have another square, no fill and no stroke, positioned here inside the artboard, and then use that as your bounding box. So you can add that now and have it in your template, or you can add that later, depending which way you like to work. So if you want to add that now, you will need a new layer, and then actually it needs to be outside. So at the back of everything, like we normally do for a pattern, and you can name this swatch box, and you can do a little box here, 200 by 200, and it doesn't really matter where this is positioned, and you can just lock it and make it invisible for now. So you can either use this or use the larger bounding box. It's up to you. I find that with the little swatch box is actually much easier to work, but we will go through all these, so don't worry about that. And in the next lesson we're going to see how to build our first template. What you can do now is to save this file as a starting point. So what I mean is, every time we do a new template, we will need to start from this point. So instead of building all these layers every single time, you can just save this and then open it and save it as a template afterwards. Now, you can of course redo all the layers, and it would be good to just repeat these steps so that you will learn it better. My Latin teacher used to say repetita juvat, which means if you repeat it more times, it will be beneficial for you. But that's absolutely up to you. But what you can do is you save it as something like template starter, for example. That's what I saved it as. And this can be a normal file, doesn't have to be saved as a template. And then you can go back, open the file, and then save that as a template. One more thing I wanted to mention, you can save it as a template into the Illustrator templates folder, but to do that it would ask you to give permission, because normally you don't have permission to actually interact with that folder. What I do is normally I just make my own folder, save it somewhere safe where I will remember where it is, and save my templates there, so that I don't have to worry about giving special permission to Illustrator and messing about with that folder. So it would work anyway, your template. And when you need to open your template, you will go to File and New from Template, and you can just go to that folder you saved, and it will be exactly the same thing. Alright, so in the next lesson we are going to build the grid template, which is the simpler one, and we're going to save that as a template. I'll see you in the next lesson.